Be prepared to fail. Be brave to fail. I was talking to my guys today, and I think if you're not doing new stuff. You're not pushing it. You just need to demonstrate the time saved, not just the stress. If someone's not able to recruit for that position and it's key, it lands on them, right? So they're the ones that are feeling the pain.
Today's episode of the HR L&D podcast is sponsored by Deel. Now take a moment, if you would, to consider the following pre-show scenario. Imagine you had to visit 16 houses just to cook your dinner. One place has the pots, another has the pans, another has the stove, and another has the food. You get the idea. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the reality is most global businesses operate exactly the same way, using 16 different tools and platforms to hire, manage, and pay their workforce. But now there's one platform that does it all, and that's today's sponsor. That's Deel. That's D-E-E-L. And Deel is the all-in-one platform built for global work. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, from automated onboarding to performance assessments and beyond, you can manage the entire worker lifecycle all under one roof. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries, or run payroll in over 100 countries. Even offer competitive benefits, equity, and equipment. With Deel's industry-leading suite of HR tools, payroll solutions, and compliance services, you can scale globally with unmatched speed and expertise. So are you ready to transform your global HR system? If you are, click in the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deel today. That's D-E-E-L. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D podcast. My name is Nick Day, CEO at JJ Recruitment Group. We are specialist HR recruiters operating in the UK, Europe, and now the USA as well. But in fact, today I'm going to bring our special guest to the show, Steve Yardley, who is Managing Director at JJ Recruitment Group. So I'll let him tell you all about what we do in the world of HR in just a moment. Just a little reminder to all of you, if you enjoy the show, please do remember to subscribe. Please do review the show if you get a spare moment. I'd be really, really grateful. But most importantly, please do share the episode with all of your HR colleagues and friends so together we can really raise the profile of human resources and people management for everyone worldwide. Now, today I'm going to introduce you to Steve Yardley, as I already mentioned, is our Managing Director at JJ Recruitment Group. He was one of the founding members of the company, joined us right at its inception in 2008. But actually, I worked with Steve Yardley even before we founded JJ. So we go back over 20 years. And during that time, Steve has placed over 1,000 HR and people professionals all over the globe across every sector, every salary level, every kind of HR role you could possibly think of. I think Steve's worked on at one point in time. So we've got a good expert today on the show who's going to talk to us about the talent challenges, about the trends that he's seeing in HR and seeing how that industry has evolved. And there are a lot of challenges in the space that we need to dive into. For example, the HR profession itself has grown by 42% in the last decade alone. That's compared to the rest of the sector, that's significant, with other sectors only growing by 10%. We want to find out why. But more importantly, when it comes to HR talent, 57% of employers have hard to fill vacancies and 29% anticipate further problems down the line. These are stats taken directly from HR Magazine and the CIPD. So I want to delve into that as well. But before we do, let me welcome you to the show. Steve Yardley, welcome to the HR L&D podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's good. And contrary to belief, we're not in the same office. I'm over in my remote office in Devon today. You're in our main office in Harpenden. I'm going to start with my first question I ask all my guests, which is this. What do the words human resources mean to you?
That's a big one. Okay. I think if it was a one-word answer, it's people. And I think it's an interesting point how that phrase has changed over the years and what human resources means, when I started, which was a long, long time ago. And now, what we look at it as a profession now. I think it's people focused now. If we look at the title, I think it's becoming that more. And I think that's a reflection of what's changed in HR, which is probably a bit of a focus of what I'll talk about today. But yeah, it's about people, but it's also, I think, about empathy and coaching.
Now, I don't want to show your age up here, Steve, but I'm pretty sure when you started in the world of HR recruitment, it was known as personnel management. So you've seen it evolve from personnel management into the world of HR now. And obviously, of course, HR itself now is kind of evolving into people management. You mentioned it's all about people, so I couldn't agree more. Before, we delve into some of the trends and things we're seeing and how we've seen the HR industry evolve, tell us a little bit about your journey. I gave a brief introduction there, but of course, you've been immersed in this space now for over 20 years. Tell us about your journey into HR, how you've seen that develop, how you found yourself at JJ. Of course, you are managing director. Just to give some context to our listeners about your experience in the world of human resources.
Okay, I suppose I'm a recruiter to start with, so we come from that point, and we've worked together for a long time. I'm probably, and you're the same, we're those rare beasts that have worked for two companies over 2 decades in recruitment. So it's a fairly fast-paced, changing environment. But I started in the city. I was actually working on finance, and then we moved into payroll and reward and those areas there. And I think it was a natural progression because they were so close together. I much prefer working in the HR space. It's, the reflection back. I think it's, for me, it's nothing against any other sectors, right? But for me, there's just continual change, development, and the people I work with, I've got a general interest in their futures. And I think you're the same. We've grown with people throughout their careers, which I think could sometimes be a stock answer in an interview, but we've genuinely done it. We've influenced lives. They've become clients, and that really has become that solidifying piece on the HR. HR is so broad now, and that keeps me interested. There's so many different things within HR that weren't there when I started. They just weren't. You've sort of shown me up with personnel. Thanks for that. But it is true. I'm coming up to 25 years next year doing recruitment. So I think really now we look at the roles that are there, the titles and the specialisms. They weren't there when we started. So then joined. We started JJ in 2008. Interesting times. There was lots of stuff going on outside us with the financial markets. But we then just pushed forward. I think we knew what we wanted to do, how we wanted to recruit. I've always been very particular about that we wanted to do it the right way, and felt that by doing that, we would have a longer term solution and impact on the market. And I think that's paid off. And here we are now, right?
I know you've been instrumental in changing the values at JJ Recruitment in your role at MD. You've introduced 3 core values: collaboration, consistency, and care. And that's directly related, I know, to the work you do in HR and the kind of people you've been working with. That I know that the clients and candidates, particularly at the exec level, have kind of fed back to you and said, these are the 3 kind of pillars, if you like, that recruiters need to understand when you're dealing with HR professionals, right? Perhaps when they're dealing with other recruiters or other talent experiences, they haven't always had those 3 things working together. So tell me a little bit about that, because that's a relatively new shift for us in terms of our values. We narrowed them down from 8 values to those core 3. It was a change that you instigated, but it was very much, in response to what you were hearing in the HR space.
It was, and it was also a wider commercial take. I think I'd looked at values, I'll probably talk about this later with EVP and culture within businesses, but the ones that really resonated with me were statements that worked internally and externally. So there was that, symbiosis. Consistency is hard, right? We're in a really, really busy environment, and the best thing to do is to do that consistent work. But, we can't do that without the collaboration. It has to come together, and not everyone gets everything right all the time. That's just normal. And that collaboration helps with that. But the one for me was that you need to care about what you're doing. We're dealing with people's careers, and we're recruiting for clients where these roles are integral to them and their projects and where they're going. And it all sat and made sense to me. But I do genuinely care about what I do and where we place people, and that my clients come back to me because we give a good service. So probably back to the former point that this is how we wanted to do it, which was the right way. And I think that reflects in our processes. We can always improve those. But if we continue to do that, we get to that higher level, the marginal gains. And you need to want to do your job right. You need to care about it.
Sure. I mentioned in my introduction that the number of HR professionals has grown by 42% in the past decade, compared to just 10% for the general workforce, which is a stat that was published by HR Magazine. That's significant growth, right? I think the stats that we've looked at internally, there's now 1.54 HR professionals per 100 employees within businesses. That's a significant number. And again, another number we've seen change. What are some of the changes you've seen in HR beyond the title changes? And you said, the world now is very different to how it used to be, that have really impacted the world of recruitment from your perspective, but also, just I guess following the trend of evolution. What have you found most interesting during that journey?
And you made the point about the titles. I completely agree. There's new titles because there's new jobs. So that uplift is there are new specializations within HR, and quite a lot is technology led. We've got better tech. We've got tech. I'm again showing my age, but I think there's been a rapid growth in the last 2 to 5 years in the adoption of HR technology and cloud-based systems, where it was previously out of the reach of certain size businesses. So, anything now from like 20 plus have got good tech, but a full tech stack is now going from like 200 to 500. And within that, there's new jobs. You've got to implement that system. You've got to, once you've implemented that system, utilize it to its fullest extent. You pay for a license. You've got a lot of data at hand. So who's looking at the data? How are you using the data, to best sort of, focus on commercial gains. But then also there's the personalization, I call it, of the tech, which will probably be the next phase, or we're in that phase at the moment. And I think this is very important to where culture and businesses are going, and where HR and HR tech can help with that. Because everything you read and everything you look at, if it's reward, benefits, employee culture, development, it is about personalizing that. And even though some people might think technology is impersonal, it allows us to do that. So I think that's a big thing that's coming through at the moment. LMS is, I think, at that point where it's about to become more important than it is now, as in adopted properly. But this is really interesting. If you drop in a system to your business, quite often it exposes the structure and the function of the business as well. So it's a really, really interesting phase when HR is now taking the tech, putting it in, but really leading that business forward. And I think that elevation has gone to the point where we're now, you're now influencing at C-level. And I think that's generally the big piece from where I started to around.
Yeah, I've had a couple of guests on the show in the past have talked about that transition. Lisa comes to mind quite recently. We were talking about that transition from HRD to CEO or to C-suite. And I still don't think it's been recognized enough in the world of HR. I think more people could make that change but there's still, I think, a little bit of a shift that's required at C-suite level to understand the value that HR professionals can bring. And I think you mentioned the word transformation there. I think one of the things that I've seen in the HR industry is that everyone seems to be going through some level of transformation. In the world of HR, there's so much plate spinning. That transformation isn't necessarily always tech-led, of course. They could be going through a DEI transformation, a cultural transformation, an organizational development transformation. And I think it's that's where the role gets so difficult for HR professionals, because they've got to manage so many conflicting priorities. And C-suite will often lay them in front of them saying, we've got a belonging problem here. We need to sort it out. I need you to sort it. I need to manage that. And then you've got, a gender pay gap analysis to do. You've got an HRIS system to bring in, and they've got to manage those priorities within the working week like anybody else, and manage those relationships, those partnerships, those stakeholders, keep them on point and on board, manage the budgets, because sometimes these transformations are very, very expensive. And of course, when you're dealing with change, there's often a lot of resistance. I know the only constant in the world is change, but ultimately they've got to manage the resistance that comes with it as well. So I think it's really interesting. When I was at a recent HR Tech conference, which I know you and Zoe went out to Barcelona recently for a different one, but I was told a stat was given to me that only 12% of organizations are through their transformation projects in the world of HR. That means at the moment, 88% of HR directors or HR professionals are still in the middle of some form of transformation, which is crazy. So with that in mind, what are you seeing as the key priorities at the moment in 2024? How's that impacting the world of talent and impacting the world of recruitment from your lens and from your perspective?
Timing is good, because my previous client call before this was for a change consultant. So it's there, it's happening. And as you say, it's not just tech-led. And I think an interesting point to make here, I was reading the Gartner report, on how they see the change, especially at this senior level, the change in the change, right? So, you've got traditional senior HR that are there to, and that this is the role, is to manage employee performance. This is a distinction from Gartner, right? But it's more about where we're going to be. And really what we need to be looking at the C-suite and the CPO, CHRO level is how we're developing managers to coach and lead and teach and have that empathy. That's really the mood shift I'm seeing. If we look at change projects, there's a million different things we can do. So I get that. But OD's there. It's really, really busy at the moment. And I think we've got some exceptional talent within that area, and more so purely specific change consultants and change leaders is an uptake in the roles that we're taking at the moment as well on the project. So dedicated for that, you'll have it. That one was a system like that we're changing, but really the person's there to deal with the cultural change and, the impact on employees within different sectors, not knowing this stuff, right? They haven't dealt with these systems, and now it's coming down the line. So that's really a big thing we're looking at in this year and going forward. To pivot, another big one is how we're leveraging diversity, equity, and inclusion to make work better. I think that's a lot of the conversation we've been having, is how do we utilize that? It's something we have to fight for. We know that. We recruit ourselves, and we understand that can be a challenge, but these are the things I'm hearing. And that's the challenges that the people I'm talking to are facing at that level. Loads of other stuff, right? Like we could be here all day.
Well, I mean, obviously, you and I are both immersed in this space, so we're reading stats and Gartner reports and things all the time to make sure that we're fully up to speed with the way, the way the market is moving or the trends that might be coming. And it's in our interest to be ahead of some of those curves so that we can prepare for it from a talent perspective. But I think, just from LinkedIn alone, there was a stat release that 82% of global leaders agreed that the HR function is more critical than ever, which I think we'd all agree on, because we just talked about the level of transformation that C-suites want HR to manage. But on the flip side, I think it was at HR Zone, Taranah said that 98% of HR professionals feel burnt out, 94% feel overwhelmed, and 88% dread the prospect of going to work at all. It's kind of a hard sell when you think of some of those stats. And I don't know how accurate they are, or what the size of the study was, but it does give an indication of just how stressful the world of HR can be and just how much plate spinning they've got to do. And, how do we manage that burnout? How are we going to, if everyone's feeling like that, how do we manage that going forward, even from a talent perspective?
Well, it's a really interesting point, because I say these things that we're doing and are going to happen. I'm not doing it, right? I totally get that. And there's some huge challenges coming down the line, and it probably feeds into those HR challenges that we have to look at, which is the skills gap, and that's not just HR. I think there was a report where 79% of CEOs worried about the skills gap in their employee base. It's like, and then that falls on HR again. So this is what I'm saying, is that there's an area where we need to be clever, and we need to be open on how we meet these challenges and how we bring that talent in. Back to the previous point about enablement, about coaching, about training. Future workforce is where I'm moving into now in this conversation, and it's huge. I was at a LinkedIn future workforce seminar probably about 4 weeks ago. Some great minds there, amazing stuff. But if we're not planning for where we are in 2 years now, we're in all sorts of trouble. And from an HR, viewpoint, that is a skills shortage. That is a talent shortage. It's an enablement piece. So we really do have to look at that. How do we redeploy is the key thing, because those roles will change. And I think there's a really interesting book called The Frame. I think it is Frame. And this is a really good idea about what we should be doing. We're humans, and we should be using, the technology coming, AI. How do we use that? We're the framers. We put the parameters on it and make that work for us. But then also, how do we how do we utilize the workforce where those roles have changed, and how do we upskill? That's that's not a year challenge. That's up to 2030, right? Everyone's
Sure.
stating that piece up to 2030. So there was a statement I read. It's like we're going to be looking at upskilling and digital dexterity. They're key, and they will outweigh tenure and experience. These are big statements that I believe in.
They are big statements. I mean, you mentioned the word there that there's a skills shortage, to quote what you just mentioned. And we absolutely know there is. You know, the old cliche of there's a war for talent. It's very difficult for me to have a podcast with yourself and not talk about the talent question, right? And where the talent challenges are, because there has become an over-reliance on the contractor market, which I think we sometimes look at, and we do contract placements, be permanent placements, but we wonder why that is sometimes. And when you look at this research that comes out from the likes of Gartner, where they say 57% of HR professionals are struggling to fill their positions within their team, that the average, I think, time to fill is 38.4 days. That seems really, really long. And I guess from my perspective, it's difficult. Because I go, well, we know we've got a solution here, right? We've been doing this for 20 years, well, certainly since 2016 at JJ, but obviously you and I go before that. And it's like, but there's a constant challenge. And I understand it because HR are relatively well-versed in the world of recruitment and talent. They're involved in onboarding, but we also know it's very different sourcing talent from an external agency perspective than it is from an internal perspective. And yet you've got all these, every single piece of research that seems to come out from every single report is that there's a real difficulty finding talent. There is a skill shortage, that these vacancies are hard to fill. We're not filling them quick enough. And we know that if you don't fill a vacancy quick enough, that impacts the bottom line in various different ways. Mm-hmm. So what is the typical obstacle then that you have to overcome on a daily basis, that where a client has all these challenges, but perhaps for whatever reason aren't considering working with an external talent partner like JGA to help them over those hurdles?
I mean, there's so many different factors in using an agency and what you get from that. I think we on our side we need to demonstrate the value that we can bring. And usually that's a case study. We can explain a situation where we work with other similar clients. I feel for people within the business that can't use our services. I would say this, right? But because you just need to demonstrate the time saved, not just the stress. If someone's not able to recruit for that position and it's key, it lands on them, right? So they're the ones that are feeling the pain. So I think realistically, it's for us to demonstrate that to them and obviously bring good candidates to them. It's tough, it's tough. We work hard with what we do. You know this, I know this. We put in a very good service. So, I think there are situations where companies also have very good embedded talent teams that are really, really good at what they do for their core business. And then there are kind of roles I always love working on. We do volume business as well, but really technical, hard to find roles, and that's our niche. And that's what we're there for those ones, and then we'd establish a relationship. And I think sometimes our client relationships are just where we are, their talent team. We're extended. It's a phone call, it's a Teams call. And we get to a point where I'm not even given job descriptions. It's just, what we're looking for. Can you go and find that talent? So to do this and bridge that gap where someone can't use us is probably over to us to demonstrate what value we can add, whether that's commercial, whether that's impact on a project, whether it's long-term, sort of mental health benefits within the organization because we brought someone in who's really good at that and allows someone else to do something more strategic So I think a bit of that's on us, and that's a conversation that's showing what we've done.
You must bear with me here, but I think it's probably worth me getting a talent partner on the show at some point to talk about the challenge they have. You mentioned there's some really, really great embedded talent teams, and there absolutely is. I think I'll give you you might laugh at the example I'm going to give in just a moment. But what I thought was really interesting is they've got a really difficult role, right? So an internal talent team, they might have the best talent partner in the world, and there was a phenomenal internal talent individuals out there working. But they've got to place roles across every position across their business, right? And it's very difficult to be a specialist in every single different function. They'll have a procurement director going, I need someone in my function, and an HR director saying, I need this, a CEO saying, I need this, a CFO saying, I need this, IT project team saying, I need this. And their job is to fill those vacancies as quickly as possible, which gives a lot of downward pressure from some very senior people. Now, of course, their remit is to save on agency costs predominantly. So they need to be strategic in where they find their direct hires from and where they don't. What we do know is all we do as a business here is we invest fully in finding and investing everything we do in making sure we can find the best talent in the world of HR and all payroll, right? So obviously our networks are vast and the content we create is all related to that. I was chatting to an HRD and their talent partner on the same call recently for a large retail business. And they asked me to define the difference. What can we do that's different? So you might have to bear with me with the example I gave. And I was thinking on my feet. I said, my mum, recently, it's a true story. Mum recently wanted me to build a shed for her in the back garden. She thinks she can do it. I sadly recently lost my dad. She goes, I think I can do it myself, Nick. I'll get the instructions and I can build it. She said, it might take me a week or two, but perhaps you can come and help me out. And I was thinking, okay, my mum in this instance is the hiring manager, right? She could probably build that shed. She's a really smart woman. She's absolutely could do it, but she's never done it before, has never used a drill. It's going to take her a while. Now, I could come in, I'll put myself in the talent partner shoes here, and I could probably build that shed really quickly. I could get it up. I could follow the instructions. I've built things before. I'm familiar with tools, but I'm not a carpenter. I could get it up, and to the trained eye, you're going to see flaws. It's still going to take me several days, and I can get it done. Or I could go with a specialist carpenter or builder to come in. Yes, it's going to cost me a bit more, but I can get it done in a day, which means I can spend that valuable time with my mum having a great time while the carpenter does the work. And I end up with a flawless build at the end. And I think that's what it is. We're never saying that talent partners can't find great talent. They absolutely can. But if that, if that time to fill ratio is accurate at 38.4 days, and we can bring that down and, half that time or whatever, and find potentially someone better because we've got deeper networks. For me, it makes commercial sense to work with an external partner because you can find people that obviously are more passive as well. We've got networks that go way beyond online channels. And that brought another interesting question with a different firm recently, where an HR partner had found a great candidate, a talent partner, and I'd sent them the same candidate over. And they said, we've already got this CV. And I said, okay. So I went back to the candidate and they said, yeah, they'd never even known about they'd already contacted the candidate. And it turned out the candidate had to go back to their records and said, I did get an email, but I ignored it. I don't know who they are. They just went into my, ignored it. I responded to Unit because, we get your content regularly. I follow your newsletters. I listen to your podcasts. And there's a difference there that, again, there's a double-edged challenge. It's easier now than ever with AI and tech to find great talent. But I think it's harder than ever to engage it. And the amount of people on LinkedIn now that ignore emails, that delete emails that come in, that don't take unanswered, unknown calls, is higher than ever. So the other challenge I would say, and one of the benefits, now there's a bit of a sale here, but it's obviously a market I know very well, and I know you do too, is when you're working on our side, it's our job to make sure that we can engage the talent. And we obviously have many tools to do that, this podcast being one, where hopefully we build an influence and a trusted content to say actually what we're doing. We know what we're doing. We know our subject area. But I just wondered if you've come across similar challenges and how you're seeing the space, because I was really pleased that you said actually, there's some really great embedded talent teams. There absolutely is. But I think sometimes the message is lost when people are looking to recruit HR talent. They don't necessarily understand what it is an external agency can do that goes above and beyond what an internal talent team can do.
Well, firstly, it's a really good point. And firstly, our challenge is to understand the culture of the business and transfer that through. And I think a lot don't do that within our industry. So I think talent are really, really good at that. Internal talent are very much living because they're there, right? They're in the business. So first challenge for us is to make sure we truly get that and understand that. And then it's to actually get, as you say, to go out and, I suppose we've got more time to do that than an internal talent person, because we're going, okay, this is bit here that we're going for. You need that person, that very specific person. We then internally communicate that so everybody knows that we put together a really good pack that will go to these people. The conversations we're having are in depth and engaged. So I think there's a difference, and it's as we've made very clear, it's no reflection on internal talent at all. And we recruit internal talent, by the way. So
we do, yeah, for sure.
So I know what good looks like, yeah, and also people are good at different things, and people have different jobs and specialisms they're good at. I don't know if you remember when we recruited for Apple for their talent, and it was crazy technical and not our stuff, but we did it. And I think it's because we've got very good processes in place, we've got very good people, we've got very good training. So I believe in everyone out there when they come to me with candidates that I can then represent them to my client, and that we've had that. It's not just a technical fit. It's not just an experience fit. It's a cultural fit as well. So, but yeah, I mean, I think everyone's good at different things, right? And pretty sure we're quite good at this, if I say so myself.
Yeah, well, a good example probably is, we've got all the resources in the world to find great talent, right? In the markets we specialize in. When it comes to finding talent for our own teams, we go to rec to rec. Yeah, we could do that ourselves, but it's not our market. It's, I could do it, but I won't do a job as well as someone who is 100% focused all the time in finding the best recruitment talent out there. And that allows us to scale our business quicker and build better teams more faster, and speed is everything. As
you say, I can spend my time better doing this piece here, and someone else can go and do that. And that's great. And that makes sense to me.
So we talked about talent. We talked about transformation. What are some of the other key challenges facing HR at the moment? Hello, HR and people leaders. Are you exhausted of the war for talent cliche? The problem is, when we hear a cliche, it usually exists for a reason. However, we think it's time for a fresh approach to the talent crisis. That's because at JGA Recruitment, we understand the real challenges you face in sourcing phenomenal HR and people candidates. And guess what? We think we have the solution. Our team is on a mission to revolutionize your hiring process. That's because we're not just recruiters. We're strategic partners dedicated to finding HR and people professionals who align perfectly with your company's vision and goals. So let's break the cycle of frustration together. Partner your talent acquisition strategies with JGA Recruitment and experience the difference in service, excellence, and results. No longer do you need to suffer the costs associated with a poor hire, because with over 100 five-star Google reviews and already trusted by many of the world's leading brands, why don't you take action today? Contact us at jgarecruitment.com to discover how we can help transform your HR and people teams. And here's a bonus. When you visit us, you can sign up for our weekly HR newsletter that's packed with invaluable industry insights and more. Let's revolutionize your HR talent acquisition strategies together and make the war for talent a cry from the past. Visit jjrecruitment.com to find out more.
I'm back to what these rapid changes are and how we manage it. So I think we go through phases now, like commercially, economically, and those challenges are actually probably being more agile as teams. So being able to pivot for changes. It seems like ages ago, right? But COVID was like a really it was a horrific time. And, but I think commercially people understood that things change quicker now. So we need to be, able and equipped as teams to pivot within different areas of commercial challenges.
I think one of the shifts we've also seen, you mentioned the pandemic there, is the massive shift towards remote-based work. I think, people management said that 14% of HR professionals specifically are looking to switch to a fully remote role. This was not for everyone. Some people still like the hybrid environment. But I think one of the challenges in 2024, the way that I've seen it, is being able to manage remote, hybrid, and in-office work debates, actually, which are coming kind of, again, from all angles. It's more plate spinning for them. But you're also managing different generations at work. We're now sort of moving from an output-led style of leadership and management for those remote-based employees, which is different, rather than sort of micromanaging whether they're doing the work. I think that's created quite a few different challenges, and that all kind of fits in as well to that well-being space, that, making work a nice place to be, a place that harmonizes well-being and makes people feel at their best, that they can belong. I think there's a lot of things people have got to pull together. But have you seen the shift towards remote work impacts the world of HR?
I think I actually, it's interesting you said it. I actually think we're on a curve back slightly. Read the press this week. It depends on the industry, by the way. So I think a lot of financial services, areas like that are probably erring towards more office. I think it's still like a 3-2 generally. The challenges were there straight away and fairly obvious. I think it's like, like you're at home, right, at the moment, Nick, yeah, and you've got a nice setup. Yeah. It's like not everyone has that. So I think that we have to be mindful of that where is a good place to work. We know on our team, there are people going, I literally will go crazy if I'm not in the office. I need people, I need to talk, I need to interact. It's back to the personalization, I think. If you want a good workforce, a good culture, and you want to foster, good group thinking, then you need to listen to what people want. I think you and I are both the same. It's like, someone wants a day at home, if that's what they prefer to do, go and do that, as long as you're efficient and effective and it's comfortable and it's, good for your well-being to be there. So it's about listening. It's about personalization. I think hybrid's probably the where it will land. Most jobs I deal with now, some are like just, they need to be in a certain time zone and that is it. Very much tech-led, very, very much tech-led. Whereas other, more traditional industry there's a flex and it's a hybrid. I think that is where it will stay. Interesting one though, what's coming is the 4-day week. If you looked at the stats, not that we're going to have 4-day weeks, right? But it will be trialed. I think 18 major economies have already had huge scale tryouts of it. Feedback's been really positive. So I think that's the next one, the 4-day week and how you work that. I'm always mindful that people shouldn't do a 5-day week in 4 days and then get paid for the 4 days, right? So there's that as well. But that's probably a big piece coming through. And the next, what's really affecting that and these pieces is the age change in the workforce. We're getting an older workforce. We're getting a more diverse age workforce, which is great. But it's how we manage that, how HR deal with that, because that's, again, another big change.
Every change brings a different set of challenges, doesn't it? Funnily enough, my close friend of mine in Teignmouth, he's just moved over from a 5-day to 4-day week. They're trialing that now. So he's condensed the hours into 4 days. He has an earlier start, a later finish each day, but he gets every Friday off. And I get very jealous. He sends me his updates on Strava where he cycled 110 kilometers around Devon Country Hills, and I'm here working. But there we are. I guess we could change it, but it's interesting to see how it's working.
There's a lot of trials going on. A lot of companies are trialing it. A lot of countries are looking at it. So that's probably the next thing coming through. With all the other stuff,
you did mention tech though as well, and how it's different in different industries. One thing that it's hard to not notice it, and anyone listening to this will be aware, is we've kind of got rid of the restrictions to global working as well now. And a big shift from the pandemic is, and certainly it's opened up the talent pools for us and for a lot of clients, for those that are able to do it. We've also seen the emergence of EOR solutions really disrupt the payroll space, where people can suddenly hire talent immediately within 24 hours. They're set up and working from a different country. How's that disrupted the HR talent landscape for you, sort of leading that function? Are you seeing more clients now being more open to, if they are struggling to find, because there is a skills shortage or a talent shortage, to start going, we'll consider someone from a global location because it's remote work anyway, it's the skills that we need, and if you can find them, off you go.
Yeah, I mean, not always, but most of the time. So I had a client who was in a stunning location in the middle of nowhere, UK, and pre-pandemic, we got someone, and we placed that, and then that role came back again, probably 2 years later, something like that. Mat leave, by the way, wasn't our person had left. We did a good job, right? But they came to me and they were just like, it's remote now. We can't be bothered. Like, we know we're in the middle of nowhere. We have to have that. And it was a systems base. Yeah. So, others, you will deal with line, the direct report, who's managing the person, and they would be open to that, but they're not allowed to because of a wider commercial decision by a bigger organization. So, or as I said, you've got tech companies going, we haven't even got an office. So, that's happened more. Back to my former point, I think hybrid, I think people still like an office, or they want somewhere, a touch point where they can all meet up and talk and socialize as well. I think that's very important. And I don't think that's forcible. I think people want to do that, not as often, probably as much. It's different to us because we started working in the city. where you would go to an office,
Yeah, we did.
and then
Windowless
probably go to a
office
pub
where you could
afterwards,
smoke.
right?
People were smoking indoors, and it was a very different environment. I remember that. Yeah,
exactly.
It was.
Exactly. So, but I think
I prefer the world now, by the way. I prefer the office environment now than to then. You've got windows and it's smoke.
Better. No, I agree. Everything is better, definitely.
So, look, I have to ask you, because you've got so much experience in this. You must, well, I know you do, because I know half of them already. Maybe you'll enlighten me to something I haven't heard before, but I wonder if you could share some of the memorable placement stories or client stories that you've got in your 20 years experience in placing HR professionals all over the globe. There must be a couple that stand out. They don't all have to be comical, because, you know, open hand saying that there's been a number of things that don't always go perfectly. And when you've been recruiting thousands of candidates for many, many years, you get some stories which you just couldn't predict. I remember one of mine being final stage interview for an investment bank in London. The candidate got there early for an HRBP role. And they said, you need to go away, you've come too early. And you know the story anyway. They went away and did all their shopping from Tesco. And when they came back, it was a panel interview. They came in with like Michael McIntyre style, with bags of shopping all the way up the arm, and just sort of put them down with all the freezer stuff. I've got an hour, I need to get to the freezer. You just think, you can't prepare someone like that. These are the unpredictables. But I'd love to know some of the placement stories or client stories that you might be able to share.
I had this conversation this week with a client where someone hadn't researched the company, and I just immediately go, here's the pack, here's the briefing pack. Yeah, this is what they've sent. And also, I think I'm more forgiving now. And I was like, they might have had a bad day. We have to understand that. We make assumptions about what's happened, and you go, okay, someone hasn't read all the stuff that we took time to put together. They might have had a bad day. Yeah, we just need to ask people and be a bit more open about it. But anyway, yeah, that happens all the time still, and there's nothing you can do. It's just life. But okay, there's lots, right? Okay, my really emotive one. The first one was, I can't remember the job. I think it was an HR administrator. It was a long time ago, and you might have been there. But and then the candidate came in after getting the job to thank us with a lemon drizzle cake, and it was. And it was just so unexpected and so nice. And it was nothing to do with, recruitment fees or anything like that. It was just, she was so happy. So that always sticks. That one I remember. There's some that we shan't discuss on an open forum, like what's been put on CVs and stuff like that. But I think also first international placements we started doing when we started placing in America, for like certain companies. It was quite exciting for us then. It was a while back now.
Yeah, it was. I remember that. Well, you and I combined on that one, didn't we? It was
exactly.
A senior HRD placement in Chicago. Yeah,
exactly. And it's so common now. But at the first ones, it was really, really exciting. It's good to remember those things. It's good to remember those highs, as it were. So, and then I suppose the crazy one would be recruiting for the Queen. I don't think I've ever done it.
Yes, yeah. Tell that story, because you ended up going. You had to get fully vetted. You placed a role for the Queen, had to go to Buckingham. Yeah, tell us the story.
Buckingham Palace twice. So normally, for people who don't work in our field, someone contacts and says, we've got a remit. Can you come and meet us? This was a while back, so it was physical rather than just doing a Teams. But of course, you couldn't just do it. Like, I couldn't just go next week because it had to be security checked, which took 2 weeks. And then we went in, and then you go there and you have to put your, I don't think I'm giving any secrets away here, right? So you have to put all of your digital equipment in a locker before you go in, and then you go in, and it is Buckingham Palace. It's like, it's insane. So, and then I don't think this person's there now, and I don't think it's too bad using a first name because the gag is here, right? So sat down, and I was told Elizabeth will be with you in a couple of minutes, which obviously made me think it was the Queen, right? So, for a second, yeah, I'm not, and it was the VP of HR was just called Elizabeth. So, really, really tough role, and very niche. And lots of people said they wanted to work for Buckingham Palace, the royal household, but wouldn't actually do it for the money. So, but we placed someone, brilliant candidate. It was a very niche role. I probably shouldn't go into the niches of it because it was very much to do with the running of the royal household. Yeah. That was on in there. But yeah, that was a good one, right? That's not going to happen again.
No, I think the one thing that's really exciting about the people don't necessarily get to see it. When you mentioned earlier when the lemon drizzle cake, it's changing careers, changing lifestyles, changing people's abilities to achieve dreams in different ways. And the greatest joy, I guess, we get out of the job is finding, there's a lot of people that are struggling at the minute, trying to find new positions. It's a flatter market than it was 2 years ago. We all know that. We feel it. But actually, the people that really need to find the right position, not just any position, that's going to speak to their values, that's going to help them achieve the things they want to do outside of work, give them the flexibility to be with their kids, to whatever it is they want to achieve. When you actually manage to find them that dream role, and you get that acceptance, it can be quite emotional, because sometimes just how long some people have been looking, or they've been struggling, or they've been out of work for some time, or they've just been really, really unhappy in their current role. And it can be that moment where they just kind of let everything out, and you're on the phone or you're meeting with them and they go, you know what, you have no idea how hard it was in that life. So I've never speak negative about an employer, but I was really struggling and this is what I've needed. And there's a lot of real joy to be had in what I think is a really hard role to be in the world of external recruitment, and what we do. But those moments are priceless. And there are too many probably to mention here, but there are people that we've placed as HR officers who are now senior HR directors for major corporations, and we've seen them work through the ranks, and it's lovely that they remember us as well and stay with you as a client when they first started as a junior candidate. And I think those are the things that really make the role worthwhile, and probably the reason you and I have stayed in this industry and haven't changed sectors or even companies for so many years.
Exactly. Well, I think it goes back to the top, right? Like, we've been doing it for a while. We've seen people go through their careers, but it does go down to consistency and care. It's down to our values, and it does resonate. I know sometimes, company values can feel not lived, should we say? And I genuinely think we do. And I think that's what happens. You can't have long-term clients and candidates without doing that, without having that true value. And sometimes, to your point, the lemon drizzle cake was, I actually think sometimes you don't realize how important what we do is. And then that because it was a bit of a shock. But then there's guys on the team this last week that, like a huge tree of chocolate came in to say thank you. And it's just, I'm not saying everyone has to send us chocolate or cake, by the way. It's just, it truly makes you stop and realize. Because I think, the world's busy, it's fast, and we do all sorts of jobs, and those things make you stop and think and realize that it's good what we do.
I think one of the hardest things is there are more candidates than there are job opportunities. Even though there's a skills shortage, it's impossible to place and help every single candidate that comes through. And I think that's sometimes a difficulty. I think that's where the values are so important. If we're consistent with our approach, open about our communication, transparent about where we can and cannot help people or support them, because people got very differing requirements. It's not just find a job. It's people will need a remote role that's only 30 hours a week, and they want this salary in this particular sector. And you've got to try and find that dream role for people. It's not always possible. And I think that's, as long as you're giving the best service you can, you would like to be remembered for that, even if you don't successfully end up placing them, which is obviously the biggest disappointment we have. Because for us, we can do all that work and there's no financial return unless we actually make placements. There's a lot of work we do goes unnoticed and unseen, both for clients and candidates, because we could do a whole search, and if for whatever reason we don't place it, or really work closely with a candidate, if we don't place them, there's no actual commercial return. But actually the return is in the relationship building and in that ability to find out more about how we can help in the future, or to being remembered, I guess.
I think it's clear communication. It's simple stuff, but it's showing a respect and a collaborative relationship between myself and a candidate. So I think clear communication is the answer to that. And no, we can't fill every role, and we're not perfect. No one is. We try to attain as high a standard as we possibly can, and we hold ourselves all accountable for that. So it's not just, oh, I'm MD, so I don't do that. It's like, this is what we do. So, but yes, as I say, we're not perfect, but I think we do very, we do try very hard to give that service. So
let's round off the today's show with some tips perhaps you could offer clients who are looking to hire into their HR teams. Now, of course, I'll give the obvious one. They could go to an external specialist like JJ Recruitment and we could do it all for them. But of course, that not everyone can do that, right? So what are some of the other things that they can do to improve the efficiency of their recruitment drives if they are trying to find really top niche HR talent in whatever area that is within the world and the vertical of HR? What are some of the tips you can provide that might help them make that a bit easier?
So it's quite a broad question, and it might be different for different roles. But if I'm giving sort of wider advice, it's how you approach what you're looking for. So if, say, you're looking for someone really super technical, someone who's got specific modules in a software, or they've worked for a very niche sector, there's loads of things we could say that will make it, more complicated. But look forward. So don't look to recruit what you just had is probably the broad statement I would give. Yeah. And it's, I'm mindful that I'm preaching to people that, and it might not work with what they're looking at, but it's usually a good tenet. And I look for that when we recruit for us. I don't want to recruit me.
Yeah. It's coming away from culture fit and look at someone that can evolve your culture.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all right at what I do, but why am I looking for another me is the question I would ask. And maybe I do need another me, and that's the need that you have there and then. But challenge it and question it and look forward. This helps with quite a few points as well, because if you're in an area where you're struggling with diversity, that might be a very good way of going about that. And also, I often find, actually, I very frequently find, is if you go for what you don't know, you get stuff that you didn't know you needed, right? So,
yeah, sure.
And look, we've got clients that are in fiercely competitive markets, they're commercial, and they need people that other people have got. So what happens there? So, but if you then reframe that and then you start looking for people that you can train, so you look for the talent that will step into that role, you win in so many different ways. So you basically, well, cost-wise, you're probably not competing with your, the guys over the road who are paying this and you've got to pay that. So, but also you get engagement and you develop talent and you bring people through, and then you get that long-term commitment from that side as well. Even taking aside how do you feel about bringing someone through and upskilling them into a certain role? So I think that's a positive. Also understand, I think this is one that was like, people probably need to understand that good people move on and they do leave jobs. And it's testimony probably to you as the manager that you've done a good job and they're moving on. That might not always be the case, but I think sometimes people don't give themselves enough recognition of how good they are in their function. And if someone good has moved on to a big position, they've had a good career move, that's a really good sell for people coming in, right? So I think it's sometimes employers are rushing to hire and not thinking about those couple of points. And I get it, because if you've got a position you need filling, I get it. But take the time and look at it and look at exactly what you need.
Yeah, I think it's the whole, if you rush it, you'll end up paying twice, whatever way that is, through time twice, recruitment fees twice, whatever.
Naming their names.
You mentioned earlier about that.
You get JD.
So you mentioned earlier about an EVP.
Yeah. Oh, the EVP.
You mentioned earlier about
the EVP is paramount, but it can't just be a list. The worst thing is where, okay, so this is an example, and name no names, but a job description comes through and it's dated 4 years ago and no one even knows what's on the EVP. So we need to be really, if we talk about understanding culture and taking it forward, it shouldn't just be a list. The culture's key going forward. We know this. We've read so many articles. We've heard so many stories. It is, but it needs to be, back to my point, personalized. It needs to be tailored. I remember many years ago, there was a financial services group that had a benefits program which involved fine wine tasting, clearly created for the senior staff and no one else, right? So it's an extreme example, yeah. But like fine wine tasting, okay, so that's 5% of the business are going to be interested in that. So we need to understand what people actually want, which we know, you and I, Nick, know it's really hard, like listening to people that aren't in our situation or our age group, or, what it's understanding that and then probably letting that voice come back through.
Yeah, absolutely right. So for those that aren't familiar, an EVP is an employer value proposition, which ideally lists, so I should avoid lists, but basically details, I should say, the reasons why someone would want to join a company. And it's not just about benefits and remuneration. It's about what the company stands for. It's about why anyone wants to work for that company and what that company really, the values, the behaviors, the culture, the opportunities, the career growth, all those different things come into compiling an EVP. And I think if you get that right and you invest that time in getting it, building a really effective EVP, it makes it way easier to recruit top talent. It just does, because people, if you're only recruiting based on salary, I think it's really difficult to get someone fully bought into what you're trying to achieve as a brand. You want people to be bought into the brand rather than just the financial return. And then you end up with a much better retention metric at the end of it. We talked a little bit about clients. I've got a few thoughts on this and I'll share mine after, but I'm going to ask you first. What about some tips for candidates? I mentioned earlier, a lot of HR professionals looking for positions at the minute, struggling to find the right opportunity, getting sometimes disillusioned with agencies and not just agencies, but ATS approaches, direct applications, getting no responses. What are some of the tips you can give a candidate who's working in HR that's trying to find a position at the moment?
I think, that straight off, it's the application process has changed a lot, right? There's a lot of volume going on out there because it's digitalized. It's very easy to apply to all sorts of jobs. So I'd first off apply to the jobs that you want rather than a blanket approach, because you'll only stress yourself out. And there's a certain amount of time in a day, right? Engage with that brand the other way around. Yeah. If there is someone you want to work with, it's quite simple to find someone, and then connect to them. I'd go to us, right? But we've already said we can't find everyone a job. So if it's a broader piece and you say, Apple, I really like to work for Apple, love the product, love the ethos, you will need to try and engage directly as well, because there's so many people applying. There's so much stuff going through. So I think that's probably the best thing on that front. Again, be open on what you're looking at. If there's a role that will get you to the next role, consider that as well. I don't think it's, I think it's a tighter market than it was like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Sure. But then that market was crazy. So as we all know, so I've likened it to a slow sort of a gentle increase that we have now, which is obviously nothing like what we had before. And I think it's that step change between the two is how we feel. I think there's a lot of jobs out there. I think specialization and personalization is still happening. And when employers are recruiting, they are being very specific about what they're looking for. So, but engage with the brand.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to share was a conversation that you know about anyway, but I overheard you having with a senior C-suite level, certainly HRD level candidate, and when I was last in the office. And it links to something actually, because I'll just quickly mention is a lot of HR candidates I'm seeing in the forums, the social chats, things that groups I'm part of, where people are paying companies to write their CVs and create a professional CV. My first thought would be very, very wary before you take that action. A lot of these individuals that create professional CVs in inverted commas have never worked in the world of HR, or if they have, they've never worked in the world of talent or search. And they create something that looks pretty, but actually is incredibly ineffective, and they can charge you the world for it. And I think to protect the people that listen to this show, they feed on those that are struggling and are feeling at the end of their tether because they can't find the right role. And I think there's a little bit of taking advantage of those individuals who are willing to almost spend whatever they can they think the CV is the problem. And often the CV professional writers end up making a real hash of it, in my opinion. And we see a lot of these come through. There obviously are some great CV writers out there, but be very cautious if you want to take a professional CV writing approach, especially when there are specialists out there like ourselves who, we're very happy to do reviews for people for no charge at all. We're out building relationships and showing support. I think the key thing here is we're placing thousands of people over a 20-year sustained period. We kind of know what a good HR CV looks like. So if you want a free review, get in touch with Steve or our team, info@jjrecruitment.com. Let us know that's what you want, and we can get in touch and support you on that search. That's the first thing. But the second thing I wanted to make as a tip, and it was a conversation that you had with that senior individual, Steve, which was there was an individual that had written their CV and you were saying, look, everything you've done here is great. And you've catered your CV to the job spec, but it doesn't tell me what you stand for. Like, what are you passionate about? What are your achievements? What is it you want to do? So everyone will always say, cater your CV to a job spec. And there's an element of truth in that, but we can take it too far because you and I both know that often what a client puts on a job description is rarely actually what they need, particularly at the senior end of the market. If there's a business that's got a problem with belonging, as an example, they're not going to put that on a job spec. It's going to be a generic job spec for an HRD. You're not going to have any indication that that's the real challenge, that transformative challenge they need to overcome, right? So you'll have people creating a CV that's all created for that job spec they've seen online, but actually it's not solving the real problem that C-suite wants solved. Now, C-suite individuals, when they go through these interviews, will actually then go through CVs and go, I've got a CV here about an individual who is really passionate about creating a sense of belonging in their businesses. They've implemented these changes, have had these effective results. That's the person we need to see. And that's what I'd always say to people. When you're creating your CV, what is it you're really passionate about? What is it you've really achieved? Where have you actually impacted change? And whether or not a job description you're applying for asks for that information or not, put it in, because actually it's very rare a job spec, particularly at the senior level, really tells you what the client is actually looking for. There's too much risk attached. And the other thing is, if they're not passionate about the things you're passionate about, and you put that on your CV, it's going to be the wrong cultural alignment for you anyway. If someone says, I don't want someone who is all about belonging and culture, whatever, and you've applied for a job, it's not, and you put that as something you're passionate about, if you get that job, it's going to be a misalignment and you're not going to like it there and you're going to end up leaving anyway because they don't value the same things you do. So I think the tip I would give, and I heard you having that conversation, is be passionate about what you're passionate about in the world of HR and make that clear in your summary. Don't necessarily worry too much about what a job spec is asking for, and particularly if it's generic. Instead, just detail what you're really good at, where you've really impacted change. And if you've implemented a system, don't just put I've implemented a system. Talk about what the impact of that was. That improved efficiency by X amount %. This, I involved the whole team. We improved belonging or whatever it is by this metric, and sort of get into that kind of detail. So that's the big advice I would give, because I'm seeing a lot of people in the world of HR struggling to know how to create a CV and how to craft it effectively. And a lot of poor advice, in my opinion, being given, and actually people charging for that advice. And I think if we can save them from those costs and help them craft a better CV as a result, then that's a win-win.
I think I completely agree. I also would encourage for our guys here and for my practice is that I will speak to my client as soon as that CV's gone over, because I agree. It's a list of jobs that someone's done. It doesn't embody that person. It's hard, right? It's just a document. So what we would always attempt to do, time permitting, is to then immediately have an engaging conversation with the client about that person as well. So it's
a good point, because actually that's one of the difference makers here. Like, we will, when you're applying for a job through an ATS online, you've seen it on LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever, you don't know what the hiring manager really stands for. That's our job. So if we're recruiting for a client and we've got a good relationship with that hiring manager, we know they're really passionate about sustainability, for example, and we come across an HRD who's really passionate about sustainability, has implemented some incredible sustainable practices in their business, it would make sense, rather than just send a CV and wait for them to come back, to get on the phone, speak to the hiring manager and say, look, I've got someone here who speaks your language. I've got someone who's passionate about the same things you are, who wants to achieve the same kind of things that you want to achieve, but none of it's listed in the job spec. But I think there's a lot of alignment here, and you need to have a conversation with this individual. And I think that's, again, one of the difference makers between working with someone who has those close relationships with external clients.
If you look at LinkedIn and it's like, oh, you're the 193rd applicant, it's like,
doesn't make you feel special.
No, it doesn't make you feel special. So
good. Well, let's open the HR L&D Vault. I'm conscious of time, so 3 short, sharp answers from you, Steve. First is this: if you had one piece of advice you would give to the world, what would it be?
Be prepared to fail. Be brave to fail. I was talking to my guys today, and I think if you're not doing new stuff. Yeah, you're not pushing yourself.
It's the acronym FAIL, first attempt in learning. There you go. If you had the opportunity, what advice would you give to a younger you just starting out in this new world of work?
Specialize sooner. Yeah, own your space. I think it's much more enjoyable. you're better at your job. But yeah, specialise in.
And last but by no means least, what is the guiding principle behavior you've seen in every great leader you've observed or worked with?
Empathy.
Yeah, it's a common response, empathy. And it's hard to argue against. Yeah. It's
I don't think
common response to get, and I can understand why.
No, I get it. I think it's probably my educational background as well. I think like pragmatic thinking and empathic thinking is just really good benefit to development and making yourself better.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, Steve, thank you ever so much for joining me on the HR L&D podcast. It's been really interesting just to talk about the world of talent, something we're both really passionate about. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully the tips we've shared in the show is going to be things that people can take away and implement or have a good think about later on. Of course, if people want to connect with Steve, I will put his LinkedIn profile in the show notes, or you can reach Steve at steve@jgarecruitment.com. And of course, if you do need to recruit top talent, then of course you know where to come. Do come to jgarecruitment.com. Or indeed, if you're looking for a new HR position as well, send your CV through for review. Meanwhile, please do stay tuned for our next episode, which will be dropping really, really soon. We're going to be continuing to explore innovative strategies and insights that are really impacting the world of HR and learning and development. So stay tuned for that. Please remember to share the show, review it if you get a moment. I look forward to being the next episode real soon. My name's Nick Day, and I look forward to, welcoming you back to the HR L&D podcast in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you. Cheers, Steve. Today's episode of the HR L&D podcast is sponsored by Deal, the all-in-one global people platform that simplifies how you manage the entire global team lifecycle. From contractors, direct employees, EOR, and more, you can manage them all in one place with Deal. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries in minutes, or run payroll in over 100 countries with just one click. Offer competitive benefits, equipment, and equity from a single dashboard. Even customize career roadmaps, performance assessments, and more for your team through Deal's suite of AI-powered learning and development tools. So no matter your global business goals, Deal's team of over 200 legal experts keeps you compliant with local laws every step of the way. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deal is built to meet your unique global HR needs. Ready to transform your global HR? Click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL.